Welcome to Insights into Insurance from the A-Team at Americana Insurance Group. All information provided is educational in nature and not intended to be acted upon without first consulting the appropriately licensed professional.
It's another Saturday morning. That means it is time for Insights into Insurance with Americana Insurance. Mike White is your host, along with Tom Sorensen. And a good morning to you, Tom.
Hey, good morning, Mike. How are you doing?
Not too bad. We got through the cold snap, and now we just have to get through until March. Maybe we'll start seeing the sunshine again.
Yeah, what do we got? Probably, I haven't even figured it out in my head. Probably, 50, 60 degree difference in temperatures.
Yeah, and they're saying that another 50 days, spring will arrive.
So let's do that. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Well, let's just jump right into our program on this Saturday morning. We do have an email that came through today, so I'll read the email here. It says, "Hello, Insights into Insurance. I've had vandalism done to my garage and theft. The culprits first stole a bunch of items out of my garage and then set the garage on fire. My insurance company wants to do their own investigation because it was considered arson. I'm offended that I have to do this, as law enforcement and fire marshals said it was theft and vandalism. Do I have any rights regarding this and not having them do the investigation? Please let me know." And this came in from Bob.
Bob? Yep. Terrific question, because this does happen. And for us to answer this question is we got a special guest again today. Always love these special guests. That means I get to talk less, and the listeners probably like that. So.
And they know more than you and I put together.
Exactly. So I'm going to introduce Scott Gleitz. He's the Director of Special Investigations at North Star Insurance. Good morning, Scott.
Good morning.
How are you doing today?
Doing well, thank you.
That's good. Hey, can you tell us, Scott, what you do at North Star Insurance and kind of why you're able to help us out with this question and discuss more further on arson investigations and special investigations?
Sure. I'm the Director of Special Investigations for North Star Mutual, and for your listeners who don't know who North Star Mutual is, we are an insurance carrier that operates in 8 states in the upper Midwest, including our most, concentrated state, which is Minnesota.
You're right.
As the Director of Special Investigations, my role is to manage and oversee investigations into both claims and underwriting situations where situations develop that look like they might have a problem. Arson would be one great example.
So as we go back to this email, let's talk a little bit about it. The law enforcement, the fire marshal says it was theft and vandalism, but now the insurance company is saying possibly it was arson. So kind of walk us through the process, Scott, if you can, as to what would be the next step for our listener email, Mr. Bob.
Well, the next step for Bob is probably to ask his insurance carrier if they will not have the investigation on their own, but candidly, I don't think he would be successful.
Correct.
The insurance policy almost assuredly says that the insurance company has the right and duty to investigate, and that it is completely their prerogative.
And why would they do that, Scott?
Well, first I want to say that I have no intention to denigrate the fine public servants in law enforcement and the firefighting community, as well as the state fire marshal's offices. They do a great job, and I don't want anything that I say to be viewed as a negative commentary on them. In fact, the fire investigators that we hire to investigate fires often work cooperatively with the state fire marshal's office and local fire departments. But the fact of the matter is that insurance carriers have more resources to put into these investigations, and they have a much higher incentive to narrow down the exact origin and cause of fires.
And when you're doing the actual claim itself, Scott, there is obviously a difference between arson and just a simple theft of a garage, because, as you say, your resources with the fire marshal's office, insurance carriers, you all come together to determine what the actual cause is. Was it actual theft or was it actual arson? And as you say, Scott, we're not demeaning anything the law enforcement or the state fire marshal office has come together, but the insurance company has to do their due diligence as well.
That's correct. And one of the things that consumers probably don't often consider is the fact that if we can establish that a fire was caused by an external party, whether that be a manufacturer who made a defective product, for example, or, say, service work that was done faulty, then we have the ability to collect monies that we've paid to our policyholder from that third party. I'll give you a perfect example. We had a fire in a garage attached to a very nice home, and it was a total loss. The amount of coverage on the home and property was about $1 million. And the fire department noted that the cause was undetermined. It was in the garage. The vehicle in the garage was badly burned, and they just didn't either have or allocate the resources to find out exactly what the cause of that fire was. Obviously, with $1 million on the line, we had a lot of incentive. And so we hired private investigators, including engineers, and the vehicle was taken to a lab, and ultimately it was proven that an oil change done earlier in the day had been done incorrectly, allowing oil to get on the engine, which got hot when the policyholder drove it home.
And for our listeners, just so they know, okay, so this happened, and and then I can just read their minds right now by talking to them. They're like, oh yeah, the insurance company is trying to get out of paying a claim. No, the insurance company is trying to do due diligence. So because other people have insurance with that company, and they're trying to protect that consumer, correct?
Yes, and to the extent that we save $1 million on that claim, for example, then our policyholders aren't going to pay that in the form of premiums.
Right.
The more claims, obviously, Scott, the more claims with the insurance company, be it we're talking about arson here and theft and garage and special investigation. A good key point is the more claims that are filed by insurance companies, it affects everyone, not just the person that's holding that insurance policy, but the more claims, as you mentioned, this $1 million policy, it just keeps adding up. It's kind of like a big balloon, and eventually that balloon's going to pop.
Correct.
So,
and then, of course,
go ahead.
There's also the incidents where, regrettably, a policyholder does intentionally start a fire to burn their property.
Right.
There have been plenty of those where public authorities have ruled that the fire cause was unknown, that they were unable to determine a cause, and where private investigators who are specifically trained, who use additional resources like electrical engineers, and sometimes they'll even bring in dogs that are trained to sniff for accelerants. There are cases where we do end up finding out that our policyholder started the fire. And in those cases, depending on the state you're in, we may be able to limit payment to that policyholder or not pay at all, which again saves our remaining policyholders money in the form of premiums.
Exactly. It's basically it's insurance fraud, and I think every single person and a listener that's got it, well, I think we all got insurance, and I would think that you would want your company to do these investigations for their protection. Now, Bob has kind of taken this personally. I guess is there a certain dollar amount that you guys end up doing an arson investigation, or what determines an arson investigation, Scott?
There's a number of factors. A lot of insurance carriers have a dollar amount that triggers an investigation. And that dollar amount is what we would call a reserve, because when a claim is reported, we don't actually know how much is going to be paid. But typically, fairly quickly, we have an idea of how much might be paid. And so trigger dollar amounts for insurance carriers can be anywhere from $25,000 up. $50,000 might be a trigger, or $100,000 might be a trigger. Then we also look at other factors when we get a claim, and that could include the underwriting file to see how long the policy has been on the books, to determine whether there's anything in the underwriting file that might look like an indicator that the insured had some motive. For example, a home insured for a lot more than its market value.
And one thing, Scott, as well, is I'm sure you're looking at how many claims that insurance policy holder has had maybe in the last 6 months or maybe in the last year. If all of a sudden you're noticing all these claims coming through on this individual, now ultimately there's a huge claim coming out there, that could be a red flag as well.
Yes, prior claims are always something of concern to us. Now, that doesn't mean that having prior claims actually means anything, but it does get our attention such that we will take a look at the prior claims and contrast those with the current claim.
So now, I don't know, does part of your investigation, do you look at like financials, if they have something that's going on in their life where they're, or is that further down the road, like if it actually goes to court?
No, that would happen relatively early on in an investigation, and that could include us looking at the insured's banking records, their credit card statements, their tax returns, bankruptcy records, the status of loans like mortgages, car loans, things like that. And the way that we're able to do that is that insurance policies provide us that right and impose that duty on the policyholder once a claim is turned in. But again, I want to assure listeners that just because we ask for that kind of information doesn't necessarily mean that we've determined that something is arson and we've made a determination not to pay. I can tell you personally, I have looked at lots and lots and lots of policyholders' financial records, and we determined that there was no problem and the claim was paid.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We're just talking about an investigation. Doesn't mean that there's any type of guilt or anything like that, but you do sometimes you do these investigations. And also, too, isn't there government entities that are, that you have to answer to about these?
Well, ultimately, we answer to the departments of insurance in most states. In Minnesota, it's the Department of Commerce. We would answer to them if a consumer filed a complaint about their claim and the Department of Insurance or Department of Commerce asked us to respond to that complaint. Or we could answer to them if they were to perform an audit of our claims, which they have the right to do.
And the biggest thing, Scott, we want to leave our listeners with this morning is, as you mentioned, if you do have a fire, obviously contact your insurance agent and just go through the process. Don't get upset that, all of a sudden now we have this other investigation. We know it wasn't arson. As you said earlier on, Scott, we're doing our due diligence as far as making sure there is no fraud, and it does affect everyone involved in those that are paying the premiums. So if you do, God forbid, if you do have a fire, take the time to talk to your insurance agent. They will walk you through that process as well.
And Scott, hey, we only got like a minute left here, but you got a really interesting story about a person in Indiana, correct? Could you share it with that as quickly as possible?
You bet. I'll tell the story quickly. There was a arson ring in the Indianapolis area, and over the course of 138 fires, public authorities determined that none of them, let me rephrase that, they could not determine the cause of any of them, meaning that the investigation's results were, quote, undetermined, end quote. Ultimately, an insurance carrier was able to establish that one of them was arson for hire, meaning the policyholder hired an outsider to come in and burn their house down. In the process of charging and convicting that individual, they were able to track down 137 other fires, all of which had been set by himself and other members of his arson ring.
It's like the mafia.
It was like the mafia. In fact, there was a drug gang involved, and the reason that he was willing to give up information about his associates is because they were willing to protect him from the drug gang that he was working with.
Crazy. That is an incredible story, and now you know why you need to do investigations sometimes. And so, listeners, that was a great story, Scott. Thank you, and I want to thank you for coming on to the show today. And just so you know, listeners, North Star Insurance and American Insurance Group have a great partnership. We've been with North Star for a long, long time, and we got a great partnership. And Scott makes up one of those people in North Star Insurance. They're based out of Cottonwood, Minnesota. It sounds small, but it's actually a pretty large company that you have. And thank you, Scott, for coming in, or I should say calling in today.
You're welcome, Tom. It was my pleasure.
All right, that'll wrap up this Saturday edition of our Insights into Insurance program. Tom, they can always give you a call.
Yep, at 507-377-2000. And they can also email me at insights@Americana Insurance.
All right, that'll do it until next week. That's our Insights into Insurance program here on Kate 1450.
You've been listening to Insights into Insurance from the Americana Insurance Group. All information provided is educational in nature and not intended to be acted upon without first consulting the appropriately licensed professional.